Hello, this is Philip at thebest3d.com, and we will today see 5 different types of landscapes to create quickly with essentially the same tool but used a couple of times in different ways. What I'll do is I'll start with the plasma noise, and that's already our first landscape. Let's go put this one aside and store this one. I am not using 9.6 here, I'm using Howler under development towards version 10. I have some new icons here, shortcuts that we can use as well, and hopefully that will give us some appetite for future updates. But what you can do here, what I'm going to show you, you should be able to do in version 9.6 in a very similar way. Alright, so the next thing is I'm going to do the same thing again, render plasma noise again, but then I'm going to change the style here, or the mode, to complement. And what you'll see here, perhaps if I change the scale a little bit, you'll see a little bit of a plateau ridge at mid-gray level, and that could be an interesting stuff. Let's use this one here as well. So we have another one. I'm going to use this shortcut here, store image, or same thing here, store image copy. That's what you can do with version 9.6. I'm going to use my lazy shortcut here. Then I'm going to do the same tool one more time. So a third type of terrain will be render plasma noise once more, but this time I'm going to change it to difference mode. And perhaps we need to, well, once again, search for something a little bit more fascinating, interesting. There's a nice little canyon going through here. Let's keep that one. So we now have 3 types of terrains already, or at least elevation maps. Now this one is not fully developed. It doesn't have the very brightest area, so we may want to go to expand dynamic range and kill this one and store the new one. We might do the same one with this one here. So restore this one, go to dynamic range and store this. So we have this one here. And then this one, the original, probably has already the full dynamic range, but just to be sure, yeah, it didn't seem like it changed much. Let's go store that. Alright, so we have our 3 terrains, and I mentioned we would have 5. Well, one thing I would do also is I may want to have the terrain develop from a low elevation into the higher peaks. So for instance, I might want to have a gradient. This tool here with the gradients, when you right click that, you have the linear gradient. If you use that one in a multiply mode, there it is, you can have the gradient go from one end to the other, let's say sideways, or you could have it go in a way like this, right? Let's go undo that. Perhaps what I like to do is actually have it from the top down like this. Right, and then just flip the image upside down or rotate it. Let's flip it vertically. There you go. So we have the darker area here. Alright, so that's one more terrain. Let's go this. And so that's number 4. And then there's also, let's go back to, let's say this one here. Let's use that one and do a few more things. There is also some warping that we can apply here, which will introduce some interesting little deformations. So you could go perhaps with not quite that much, but do a couple of weird formations, which tend to create really interesting looking patterns or shapes as an elevation map. And some deformations that might be of tectonic proportions, Jurassic deformations, sediment layers. And now also, why not also go with the circular gradient tool, and still in the multiply mode, add a couple of darkening spots, right? Things like these. If you needed, for instance, to have more dark area down in the lower area here, put a couple of these here, and perhaps do also a little bit of an additive mode. Oh, that's too much. So let's go and undo that. maybe we need to work on that, the sweep editor, and actually reverse it. So we would have kind of an additive where we are in the center part, and then go darker, less additive, but not quite that much. So if you look at the value here, maybe something like this might be a little bit easier on this. Maybe a little bit of a decreasing value like this, right? And then plateau there. Smooth it a little bit, and so now we can do some peaks. All sorts of interesting patterns coming out of that for elevation map use. All right, so this is our terrain number 5. Let's go and store that one. So we have our five terrains, and these are just the elevation maps. Now I'm going to go back to the very first one. I think this one. Yep, this one here. And I'm going to go into terrain, the 3D designer, to create the first one of the terrains. All right. First thing we'll do is we'll go straight into the more options here and show the texture for the coloring. And we'll add a little bit of snowfall. We'll reduce the smoothing down to about 6 or 7, and the intensity as well. And work a little bit with the green. Let's bring the snow up a little bit. All right. Let's bring the snow into the deeper parts, but then we'll need to actually have the valleys there. There you go. Adjust all of these a little bit so you get some snow, get some green. And now let's work on the lighting. So we have the light. Let's bring the altitude down. Let's bring the zenith up. Let's bring the intensity up a little bit, and make the azimuth come from the side. There you go. Then we also have some ray traced shadows, soft shadows. Let's work on light source number 2. Let's bring the altitude all the way up, zenith all the way down, and adjust the brightness or the specular part a little bit. All right. And then let's work on the heading and the pitch down a little bit, like so. Let's bring the whole thing up a notch, and pitch back a little bit more like this. And there you go. Adjust the size, the scale. Let's change the sky color. Change the color to about kind of a bluish with a little bit of a milky white. And then add some fog level. Not too much. And some ground fog. Let's go non-linear ground fog and take the high value. So we get some ground fog. Now we can also adjust the amplitude here for these mountains. Right, and one more time perhaps adjust the lighting, not too bright. One thing you might also want to do is add some ambient occlusion to reveal some more details in the shaded areas. Perhaps reduce the ambient occlusion detail level here, and then work on the pre-filter. And well, we have some interesting starting point here. Let's see, what else could we do? I think that's about it. Let's go without the ambient occlusion. All right, so here's our starting point. We want one more. That's puffy clouds, some puffies there, and make them disappear. Let's go to the back here. Not that bright, and make them disappear to the far left. Yeah, just something on the horizon to keep it interesting there too. All right. Oh, we didn't do any erosion yet. Let's put some erosion there too. Okay. And perhaps flatten threshold up to about 9. And the amount of rainfall, let's make it 33. And one more time, take a look at the sediments here. We don't want too much. We also don't want too little of it. We do want a little bit something there. Okay. All right, and that looks interesting. Now, one thing I want to do is have a little bit less separation on those colorations with the white there, the white color. If you look at that, this is really interesting to have these snow caps, but you want to have a little bit of pollution. You want to have some of the gravel, some of the dirt, some of the rock to spill over into the white part to make it look like it's a little bit older, or there has been some other types of erosion pollution. And one easy, cheesy way to do that is to actually mess with the color map. So one thing we'll need to do, this texture, the color map, we'll need to store that. Well, it's not so much we need to, it's more like we want to. We may want to also store the depth map in case we want to actually do this rendering outside in a different program. So let's store the depth map and then cancel the whole thing and keep good track of these color maps and this height map. Right? So these represent the height map with the erosion on it. Right? That's the one with the erosion and the sediments. That's the color map. That's the original, or this one here was the original. And so here we have a couple of different terrains we can use. All we could use essentially with the same color map, or we could do their own color maps each time. What I want to do is focus on that particular color map here, which we actually have. If you think about it, if this was the original height map, this color map is actually coming from the swap image. There it is. Right, so that's the same thing here. So we have here. The thing is, if you want to use that in a different program now, you simply export that, right? You save that right here as a JPEG file or PNG if you want it lossless. But before we do that, we may want to add, as I mentioned, a little bit of pollution. So what we'll do is we'll add some jitter. So we get sort of a crossover between these two regions. The snow needs to go a little bit more into the rocky area, and the rock needs to go a little bit more into the snow area. So there's a couple of really good ways to do that. One efficient way is to use simply the noise filter with one of the jitters, right? Jitter plus, jitter blur plus. There's a couple of different techniques you could use here. Just something like this. Now that's not all. Let's apply that, but then we also do another one, which is the photographic filter with the light diffusion. However, we switch over to the dark diffusion. So we let the dark area that we have here prevail into the bright area. The dark part will diffuse into the bright. And so that's an interesting one to add a little bit of discoloration, staining, so to speak. And then you could do that 2 or 3 times. Light diffusion there one more time. Again, on the dark diffusion, you could do the precise level. And then there's also another one you could do, perhaps a little bit of a blur. There's a simple blur, just something like this, that can also add a nice little bit of blurry touch there. There's others. There are the photographic soft contrast improvement that will bring the bright part, it'll keep it a little bit brighter, especially if you pronounce it even more here, but adjust the softness and you get some darkening here as well. Adjust that a little bit. Oh, and then also sometimes you want to have a little bit of a sedimentary appearance, and one fairly interesting way to do that is you simply displace it. Right? Let me go and zoom back out a little bit here with my zoom there. To sort of displace this, let's see, where is it? Displace by swap. So whatever image you have in the swap image, that would be this one right now, right? Displace this coloration. For instance, with the pool displays or the color trail displays, pool displays is really nice. Look at that. It makes like patterns, like as if it's like marble or something like that. So it's gonna look really interesting. But we don't want to have too much of that. So what we'll do is we'll use the interactive undo, right? That's this little thing here with the slider. And then that way you can say, well, this was before, this is after the displacement. Let's do something in between, maybe half and half or a little bit more on the original side, but it'll still have a hint of that. And all in all, that will produce a really interesting color map. All right, so I'm going to store this one first here. There it is. And so we have now these two. That's the original, that's the modified one. And I'm going to go back to my original elevation map. this one here. All right, and create my 3D Designer landscape rendering again. It remembers the original parameters or the prior parameters, and so we still have the clouds, we still have the same vantage point. We could change that now. We could go back farther away. Perhaps there's too much fog here. Right, and bring this up a little bit. Okay, and you can see now there's a nice change in the appearance there with respect to the color. It's not just it's not too crisp a sudden white anymore. There's a little bit more pollution, a little bit more realism. It looks like dirty snow. It looks like weathered snow. A little bit more late summer snow with all the rocks and the erosion and the wind activity there. Let's see, what else could we do here? Perhaps go back a little bit and reduce that fog there. All right, let's leave it like this. Okay, perhaps a little bit more on the pre-filtering. You don't need all that much detail, and a little bit less on the erosion, and then keep the anti-aliasing level at the top, and okay that, render that. All right, so here's one level we can do. You can do all this with either PD Howler or with PD Artist as well. All right, so here's one render with the first type of terrain. Let's go and store this, and that one belongs to this guy here. Now we'll go to this terrain. Or this one here was perhaps the next one. Yep. Okay, and just enter the same parameter again. What was it? The same transform 3D designer, and here is our new terrain. So let's go and get a little bit of a close-up look here. Adjust some of these and come a bit closer. Yep, something like that. That looks a little bit more dry, a little bit more desert rocky. Cool. Let's keep that one. And, again, if you need your final render at high quality, always make sure you have this 5-level anti-aliasing. There it is. There's number 2. That will be the one here. No, I think that was this one here. Then let's go to this and render that again with the same tool, 3D Designer. And this time perhaps we'll adjust the amplitude a little bit, have some higher peaks, deeper valleys, perhaps reduce the intensity of the ground fog somewhat. There you go. And what else could we change here? Oh no, that seems good enough. Let's keep that. Perhaps a little bit less on the ambient light. And if you do see all this darkening here, maybe that's a good time where you want to add some ambient occlusion with the multiply mode or with the additive mode. Let's uncheck it and recheck it and add that. There you go. And okay that for the render. So you see a third one of the terrains, all produced in a very similar way, but with slight difference with regard to all these parameter options. So, oh, we haven't stored this one here. Let's go store it. Store image. There it is. So we've got this one. Now let's go to the next one here. This and render that. So this one is the one where we have a little bit of a darkening on the front here. So that should bring us a bit more of a deeper valley. In fact, I'm going to do even more of that. I'm going to go to gradient modes. Excuse me, where is it? Linear gradient tool, and to make sure I'm still in a multiply mode. There you go. But it's reversed, so I want to make sure I pick this gradient here. Right, go to gradients, pick this one, undo, and there you go. Because I really want low valleys down here. In fact, if you start on the inside, it's going to be all dark, totally flat here. That might be too low, so let's do a little bit of interactive undo on that again. Bring it back just a notch. So we know we have some very deep low valleys here. And something that actually looks even better is if we have a couple of areas coming back up. If we do some valleys or some low rolling hills, right? We'll skip that perhaps for another one. Let's make sure we have the dynamic range still. So it's fully highest, brightest peaks over here, and then lower valleys here in the front. All right, let's store this as our terrain number 4 after extra mod work, and go and render that one more time. Transform 3D Designer. And now see how we have this very low elevation here. That's where the fog is, the ground fog is showing, right? Something like this. Let's try without the ambient occlusion first, and adjust the terrain pitch. There, let's bring it down a notch with the Y on the move. There you go. And perhaps make the pattern of the clouds a little bit brighter. But also move them out of the way a little bit. There you go, a bit more in the background. There you go. I'm gonna go with the camera zoom a little bit tighter here. More of a tele. There. And make sure the light hits it from the side with nice shadows, a little bit more brightness, a bit more specular. And let's move these clouds behind the scene. There you go. Now this fog here, not too happy about that. You know what, let's try without fog. Ground fog off. There, so we are at the limit here, so we need to go into the scene now. And down, there you go. Alright, a little bit more pre-filtering. So we perhaps reduce some of these steps here. And that will of course make it a little bit softer on the hills there too, the peaks. So that's where you need to perhaps find the middle ground. So maybe you need to keep some of the crispness there too. And a bit more erosion. That looks all good. And I don't know, if you don't like the coloring anymore, you can always redo that, right? Create texture. But we did put quite a bit of work into that. Changes in color there. That's probably just fine to keep. Let's keep it a little bit of a different angle. Like that. Alright, let's go in closer. There. And I think I'll keep just that one here as the next render. And that's our terrain number 4. And we still have a 5th one to do. And so for the 5th one, I'll redo everything. As soon as this one's done, there you go. Let's go store this one, number 4. That belongs over here with this one. And now I'm going to go and restore this and recreate everything, which is I'm going to go and transform 3D Designer, and I'm going to nuke everything here. I'm going to go and redo the texture as well. So the color map is gone, and I get a new one here. Perhaps a bit more greeny hills, perhaps not colored. No, actually I do like those extra rocky areas or snow areas. Let's bring the grass down a little bit there. And also blur it a bit more. So the smoothing here, if we bring that down to 22, perhaps we get a bit more of a blurry transition. The intensity a little bit less. And bring the snow down a little bit to lower values, lower elevation. There, the grass too. Let's show a little bit more of the rocks. There. Alright. Let's see what else could we do here. Look at it from different angles. Something like that. There's too much erosion here. A bit more sediments. What is your sentiment about those sediments? Something like that. Let's keep the coloring, the light source though, from this side. Nice shadows. We want to see those shadows here. Okay. And that will be our, almost our last rendering. Have a little bit of fog here. And okay that. And then we're almost done. Last thing we'll do is actually turn this into an animation. So as soon as this rendering is done, there it is. Let's go store this one as well. And we now have already 5 different renderings. We have this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. And I'm gonna go back to this elevation map that was used for this rendering. And with this elevation map, I'm going to go switch back to the swap image where the coloring is and apply the same technique once again for everything. We could do a very simple one, simply soft contrast improvement, something like this. And the next one is light diffusion, but switch over to dark diffusion. Something like this, and perhaps a little bit of jitter. Let's go to noise, jitter blur. Okay that, and then use the interactive undo. Do not have too much of that, just a little bit. Alright, that's our color map. Let's go switch back between the two and turn this into an animation. Right, so we'll go and create an animation. I don't know, maybe 123 frames, and let's go create, let's use the timeline, and click on the filters, 1, 2, 3, down to 3D designer, this time with the keyframes. It remembers the most recent parameters. Now we have better coloring. And let's do ourselves a favor and just keep it as is and do a little animation with that. So here we have a view that's a little bit different. We're getting, nice. I don't want this to shut down now. Let's see. Let's go and zoom in a little bit. So maybe we'll do an animation where we just pan through that, and then we'll use the motion interpolation, the motion estimation to do even smoother pans once we have identified some nice particular vantage points we really like. So let's say, for instance, we want this as a starting point. Let's put the keyframe there and go here to simply to the left. Something like this. Put another keyframe there and go to our last frames over here, and this one will just rotate around a little bit, drag this around, something like that, and also zoom in some more. Not a whole lot there to zoom. Good. Stay focused on those high peaks. Beautiful. Let's keyframe that. And that's it. Let's go render that, apply. And one thing we'll see here is we have only 120 frames being rendered. That's nice, but it's not going to be perhaps exactly as long as we need it. Maybe it's going to move too fast. Maybe it's just not going to last long enough. And we may want to do something about smoothing or extending it. Right? Usually once you do a rendering like this, you have a particular area that you really like a lot, and you wish those 30 frames that covers that area in the animation timeline, those 30 frames could be stretched to 200 frames or something like that. So that's exactly where the motion prediction module will come in handy. We'll do that in a separate follow-up rendering, in a follow-up part to this tutorial, to see how to work with this after you've rendered it. All right. So after we've done this rendering, we have 100 or so frames, and maybe we'll find that from around frame 20 to frame 50, we have a really nice sequence, a really nice area of the terrain captured, but it's moving too fast and it's only covering about 1 second worth of animation. What we'd like to do is now do the motion estimation or motion prediction to time stretch it and make it last much longer. And that will be a great use of the motion prediction module. All right. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Thanks for howling and waffling. And I hope this will give you some ideas of creating your own fantasy backgrounds, landscapes, mountain scenes, or simply create them but not render them here, because you can export these elevation maps, height maps, and also the color maps, and take them over into your game device, game design system, and take it further. All right, thanks for watching.